All right, it's 1 o'clock, everybody. Thank you very much for joining. Really appreciate you coming to the DC chapter's first Lunch and Learn, first really official event for 2021. Just a quick introduction of me. For those who don't know me, I'm Rob Hamlin, and sorry, my slides keep advancing by themselves here, but Rob Hamlin with CVent, and this is clearly my pre-COVID picture that we have up here. I'm going to be vice chair of the board in 2021, and it's good to have you all here. So some housekeeping before we kick off here. Our chapter chair, Donna Jarvis Miller, was unable to be with us today, but all of us on the board are looking forward to a strong year in the event industry, and we're excited about the role that we as an organization can play in the event industry, really helping drive it forward. And Donna sends her apologies for not being here, but you will be hearing from us very soon on some exciting plans that we all have for 2021. We look forward to your input on that as well. So plans about how, again, we can all help drive the industry forward and how you all can take advantage of that, and also how you all can participate. One big thought of that as a chapter is that we're going to continue to keep our health and safety of our members in the forefront as we make decisions about what events to have, when to have them, what they're going to look like. So our February and March events are definitely going to be virtual, and please save the date. February 12th will be our next Lunch and Learn, and you'll be getting some information on that soon. And we'll all be meeting internally, keeping an eye on things, of course, to try and determine when we can go back to, first of all, a hybrid environment, and then hopefully, ideally, face-to-face as we go through the year and get through some of this. I think we, as individuals and certainly as market players, are anxious to do that as soon as possible, but we're keeping safety in place or in mind for that. So a couple other things I want to do before we get kicked off is I wanted to introduce the new board. We thank you all for your part in helping elect that. And I'll run through this very quickly. Some of these are names that you know are familiar to you from previous years, and others, there's some new faces. So our chair, as I mentioned before, will be Donna Jarvis Miller, DJ, as she is commonly known. I will be vice chair. Secretary is going to be Claudia Maurer. She's been on the board, I think it's her 5th year on the board. Thank you, Claudia. Treasurer is going to be Mark Shadwick with Fern, and the immediate past chair, of course, is Paula Hers. And thank you very much, Paula, for your service there as well. In addition to that, the board of directors will be Jen Ellick running program content, and Jen's with us here today. Lisa Williams with program logistics. Drew, and I worked with him. Drew Squelia will be helping with special events. Sponsorships going to be Phil Sames from Federal Conference. Marketing, Karen Vogel. Communication and outreach is Jessica Finnerty. Community services, Nina Dadgar. And young professionals this year is going to be Austin Kappa with Bear Analytics. So again, thanks to everybody on the board, and thanks to everyone listening for your help in electing that. All right, so I talked about events coming up. We're going to jump right into the program. Before I do that, just one quick comment. Donna wanted me to talk about the every year the chair gets to pick a couple of charities that we're really going to focus on as an organization. And this year, Donna's picked 2 of them. One is United Community, and they are the largest nonprofit in Fairfax County. They who provide food bank, daycare services, community centers, after-school learning, and a whole lot more. So we're going to be working with them over the course of the year to develop a number of community service projects, which you all can take advantage of. These are a lot of fun. I've done a lot of these in the past with other charity organizations that we've worked with. In addition to that, there's the Michael J. Fox Foundation for Parkinson's Research, and I think a lot of you are probably aware of this organization. They obviously do an awful lot on the Parkinson side of it. Michael J. Fox has been such a leader in that. And Donna would like to work with them, especially in memory of her father, who suffered from Parkinson's, again, in the chapter's name. So look forward to more information about that. I'd also like to thank our sponsors. Sponsors are just critical to what we do. So ASP for building the website, wonderful. CVent with registration, MDG with our newsletter, EPNAC and photography, and then MAR, Association Meeting Management, is our administrator this year as well. And final note on that, just if any of you all are interested in sponsoring, please let us know. It's just absolutely critical to our success, our growth as an organization. We know that it's tough times this year, so much change, et cetera, but we would love to work with you. If you would consider sponsoring, please let us know. And you can contact Michael Romero if you have some thoughts or ideas there. And we want to get really creative on how we can do that for you and how we can best support you. So without further delay, let me introduce Jefferson Davis, who's our speaker today. So just a little bit of background, a couple of notes he and I were discussing about just how challenging 2020 was for all of us, I think, in the industry. You know, obviously live events being completely shut down, and boy, I think back to February, it's a year ago when we first really started thinking about this and hearing about this. But who could have imagined? I know back then with a lot of our clients, we were saying, well, certainly by August or September, we'll be back to live events. But here we are, still with an awful lot of uncertainty. And it's really changed all of our lives, all of our jobs, what we've had to do. I talked to event managers who now all of a sudden have to become video production experts, and countless other examples of that kind of change. But the good news is that I think it's caused a lot of growth for a lot of us, and it's given us the opportunity to learn an awful lot of lessons in what virtual means, how best to execute it, what that might look like going forward. And to that end, and to talk about some of those lessons, today we have Jefferson Davis with us. He's the president of Competitive Edge, excuse me. He is personally one of America's leading exposition productivity experts. This is what he studies, and he brings almost 30 years of specifically around exposition industry experience, worked with over 260 associations, I want to say, nonprofits, et cetera. And last year, as we went through this whole virtual world, he spent a lot of time analyzing virtual expos and really defining what those critical success factors were, develop strategies and techniques to help exhibitors and get the most out of those virtual exhibits. So without further ado, again, let me introduce Jefferson, who we can see here, with a quick look back to move forward with your virtual expo in 2021. Please give a warm welcome to Jefferson. And thank you, Jefferson. I'll stop sharing, turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you, Rob. Hey, Happy New Year. And thanks for everyone for showing up to this new session, a quick look back to move forward with your virtual expo in 2021. I always think of the quote from Plato, who said that the unexamined life is not worth living. I would argue the same thing for the year, right? And what a crazy year, 2020. I want to throw out a quick assignment. I would like each of you to go to the chat very quickly. If you had to describe 2020, your experience of 2020 in a few words, one or two or three words, what would those words be? Go to your chat right now and type in the words that you would use to describe what 2020 would be. And Jen, if you could take a peek and share a few of those that come up of what people's words to describe the year were.
Of course. And here we go. Full of fear, stressful, frustrating, creative, like an episode of Doctor Who. Interesting, nuts, hectic, busy, too many unknowns, uncertain, challenging, disheartening, astounding disappointment in my fellow man. Netflix. Exhausting, innovative, changing, unbelievable, huge learning experience. We got another stressful. Lots going on.
Yeah, so crazy year. So I'm gonna, in my experience in 2020, working with my show organizer clients like you, I'm gonna kind of use the three words that I felt and I think a lot of them felt. And I think it'd be best if I showed it to you in the form of a book. Ready, fire, aim. Right? What a moving target it felt like, right? It's like all of a sudden our live shows got shut down there. I was at my last live show in Atlanta, which was Modex, and got home on Wednesday the 11th, and on Friday the 13th of all days, right? Friday the 13th, the walls started falling and they just kept falling. So what we want to do today in our time together is try to take that quick look back at, virtual expos in 2021, not to beat ourselves up and say, oh, we did this wrong, we did that wrong, but more to look back at kind of like what we did, the behavior that we took, the impact, right, that behavioral choice had, and then try to find a key insight in terms of how do we learn from that going forward. So how do we make 2021 even better? One second. So most of you know me. I've been around trade shows longer than I care to admit. Got tossed into my first show in 1985. Got into the business in 1991, and I have lived and breathed trade shows really my whole life. I had my moments during this pandemic where I was thinking, now what would I do if I weren't doing trade shows? And I didn't have many answers. So this is kind of the space where I live and breathe. Probably worked with many of you over the years. Everything that I do in my work with show organizers is about getting, keeping, and growing exhibitors. And last year spun off a lot of new direction for all of us. So what I want to cover today here is the objectives and then get into this. The first thing that I'm going to do is share some of the collective research on how virtual expos performed in 2020. Then I want to kind of go over these, my screen's jumping for some reason, 10 key factors from my perspective. Now, by the way, and let me say this right up front, the 10 lessons or factors I'm going to share are not the only. And each of you probably have your own lessons that you learned. And what I'd like you to do as we go along today, and we're into these lessons, I'd like you again to go to your chat and share what was one of the big lessons that you learned in 2020 from your virtual expo, and how can you use that lesson going forward to create a better tomorrow for yourself, your attendees, your exhibitors. Then I'm going to move into 10 practical strategies to increase exhibitor confidence in participating in your next event. And my big walk away for today, what I want for all of you is I want you to listen very carefully with minds wide open, with a pen and a notepad in hand. And I want you to find 3 specific things you're going to take away from this that makes sense for you, that you're going to put to work for your 2021 Expo. So let's get rolling. The reality, right? The harsh truth is that we are, based on where the pandemic is and this new strain that's emerging and the speed of vaccines being delivered, we've lived in the virtual space for the last 9 months, not by choice, but by force. And then, the end of the year came around, and we, all of us in the industry are super excited about the emergence of vaccines, which gave us hope that we are going to be able to get back to live events in 2021. And I just read a research report from Event MB this week that unfortunately said what I think we all knew was coming, was our industry is going to need to rely heavily on virtual event engagement for the bulk of 2021. Certainly the first quarter, the second quarter, hopefully not too long into the third quarter, but we don't know. We're really in uncharted territories here. So the big idea that I want you to take away for, on this message is that economic lifeline, because that's what it is. We were rushed into it. We were forced into it. We had a lot of challenges, and we really have to get this right. Many of you on this with me today are maybe going into round 2, your second go round in the virtual world, and we got to get it right. This is because there will be no third chance. We have to get this right. Okay, so for some reason, my builds are just automatically coming up. I apologize for that. Yeah, boy, talk about going up. Maybe it's a Zoom thing. Let me see. Okay, the numbers telling the story. Okay, so as I go through these numbers too, by the way, if you top of the mind know what your numbers were, you may want to jot them down. This is a great place kind of to do a quick benchmark and see how your event performed relative to the average B2B North American event. So number one, the numbers tell the story, is that the average show was only able to recapture 13% of the revenue from their live event. And that is a CEIR study. So I guess the first question for you is, how'd you do? Were you above that? Were you below that? Okay. Number two, and here it goes again. Every time I touch, it's going to do this. It must be a Zoom thing. I apologize. Hold on. So I'm going to leave it up. So only 15 to 40% of the live exhibitors, as an industry, we were only able to bring 15 to 40% of our live exhibitors into our virtual expos. How did you do there? Above, below, on par? As you can see, if we're relying on exhibitor revenue as a big part of our organizational revenue, that's a number we're going to have to improve upon. Okay. Number three was that the average virtual attendee, Freeman just put out some research within the last few weeks. So these next few points are from Freeman. And this one kind of blew me away. I don't know if it blows you away, but it totally blew me away, is that the average virtual attendee was only spending 34 minutes on the platform. That sounds low to me, but again, Freeman, very credible industry-wide research. So that's telling us something, right, about our ability to attract and engage our virtual attendees and keep them in the platform. Number four, another Freeman statistic just came out. 92% of attendees found the virtual event experience frustrating. Number five, less than 40% of virtual attendees interacted with virtual exhibits. So that means about 60% of attendees didn't even interact with the virtual exhibitors. And again, if we're relying on exhibitor revenue, we have to figure that one out, right? Because a lot of them, there's already a lot of word on the street about virtual in the exhibitor community, which is shown in these next four statistics. Evolio Marketing, most of you know Joe Fetterbush, super great guy, was part of Exhibit Surveys for many, many years. He runs Evolio Marketing, and he's been doing some great work, research right now on virtual. And his research found that only 9% of exhibitors in a virtual event were satisfied with their participation. 44% were in that kind of neutral, ho-hum, and 47% were dissatisfied, not happy with the experience. Again, as an industry that relies on exhibitor revenue, these are really important points for us to keep top of the mind as we enter into this wave two of virtual events, if you will. And number nine, 45% of exhibitors that participated in a virtual event said they do not plan to participate in another. So what these numbers are telling me is that we have our work cut out for us, right? It cannot be business as usual. It cannot be, we've done things a certain way and therefore we're going to keep, no, you're going to almost have to question everything going forward to get through these next 2 quarters, these next 6, hopefully not longer than that again from right, our lips to God's ears, right? But the numbers tell the story and it's not a great story. But, you know, one of my mentors, Michael Masterson, always pushed me, recognize reality, right? Is that I can't wish things were better. I have to understand what's going on, and then I have to go to work to make them better, right? So I know some of these numbers look scary. What I would like to say before we get into our 10 lessons is to keep these top of the mind as you plan your event and get very proactive in how do we improve the numbers? Because again, the numbers do tell the story. They paint a very clear story here. We have some work to do. We have big rocks to push. And as an industry, we're smart. All of you on this. I mean, this is what we do, right? We overcome challenges. We're brilliant with this stuff. We got to roll up our sleeves and double down over these next 6 months, at least here. Okay. So let's get into the lessons. Number one, and again, these are in no order, and these are not all of the lessons. Again, I'm sure you have your very specific lessons that you've learned. And again, I want you to go into your chat and be willing to share, what was that big lesson that you learned in 2020 that maybe can add to what I'm going to talk about and help us all. So here was behavior number one that I saw right out of the gate. And I work with, on an average year, I work with 40 to 50 show organizer clients a year. So the first behavior was the moment our live events canceled, right? There was this, we felt it was necessary. We felt that we had to produce our virtual event pretty much in the same dates as the live expo. Now, as I share these lessons too, please keep this in mind. I understand that the majority of you work in associations and you have boards and committees and task forces and executive directors. And maybe some of these lessons had nothing to do with you, right? And maybe you did not even have the ability to influence it or control it, right? But at least going forward now, if you have to fight this battle again, right, you can come at it in terms of what we learned, the impact, and maybe get people to rethink how they're doing this. But number one, so they said, oh, geez, our show's canceled. We got to do a virtual event. We got to do it on the same days as, no, you really didn't, right? But because we're so used to that, right? You know how we are, we're so date specific in what we do. And so I feel like this may have forced a rush to judgment on the virtual event vendor that we selected or partnered with, the production of the event, the promotion of the event, and probably reduced the amount of time that you really needed to plan, to promote, and execute the event. And so the key insight here was that, because all of us pretty much were in shelter in place, nobody was getting on airplanes flying anywhere, as long as you have internet, right, and a computer, the event was accessible. And so maybe as we look back at 2020, we could have maybe said, did we really have to rush that? Could we have moved it a month forward, 2 months forward, and given ourselves more time, right? Because this is new. I mean, it's hard enough to be under the pressure of, trying to produce the event close, but when it's brand new, I mean, some of the words that all of you used to describe your experience with 2020 in the business realm had to do with some of this. So that was a big lesson, right? To me, the takeaway is you don't have to do it on the same days and times as your live event. You have some flexibility. Number two, okay, some of us, not all of us, but some of us, due to our existing contracts or the relationships that we had in play, felt it obligated to go straight to our current vendors to produce our virtual events. The impact of that was it may have been a rushed unilateral decision-making, right? Where we really didn't have the time and to explore what the best fit might have been in terms of event technology. And now many did and some didn't, but if we didn't go out to our exhibitor universe and try to get some input there, then it felt like a unilateral decision they didn't have a hand in. To me, the insight from this was that, it may have been necessary, right? But if we could have taken a little more space, and especially if we could have gotten some exhibitor input in terms of platforms, many shows that happened in the third and the fourth quarter did a much better job of getting the exhibitor, the advisory committee, their anchor exhibitors involved. And one of the key things there was if the exhibitor was part of the platform, they had input on the selection of the platform, then the kickback, if the event doesn't go so well, is a little less, right? A little less. I mean, it still doesn't totally solve the satisfaction issue, but I think collaboration may have been helpful if it was possible. Now, I know there were cases economically where it wasn't possible for a lot of us. So ask yourself on this second, who did you choose for a vendor for your virtual event? And many of you had to choose more than one and try to cobble them all together. And what factors really drove that? And if you had to do it again, would you do it that way again? All right, number three, setting our exhibitor acquisition goals too low, okay? Like many shows, I mean, I talked to shows that had like 750 live exhibitors. And I asked them, and I said, what's your goal for virtual exhibitors? And they said, well, we're hoping we can get at least 50 in, or maybe 100, right? And you know how the law of expectations work. You're pretty much going to get what you expect. So if you kind of set the bar too low, then it's like strangling your exhibitor revenue. And that created all kinds of backlash in terms of financial pressure, staff layoffs, furloughs, terminations, all kinds of stuff. The insight in goal setting, I always believe, I was taught this earlier on, I really believe you should have a must do, meaning this is the minimum level that we had to produce to keep the doors open. And then have that should do. Hey, you know what? Given our industry, given our relationships, we should be able to do that. The second goal. And then the third goal is the nice to do. You know, if we really pull this off, this is the target. And I would much rather see an organization work to the should to nice instead of just accept the must do, right? Set the bar low. And then now part of this, again, I know had to do with economics, because when you were investing in your virtual platform, many of the platforms was based on the number of attendees and the number of exhibitors. And therefore, from a budget standpoint, you had to go, hey, maybe we're not going to be able to afford more than 100 exhibitor slots. And therefore, but it became kind of like set in stone. I actually had shows tell me in the second quarter that we're not trying to get any more. We've got 100 in, we normally have 500 or 600, and that's it. We're not trying to get any more. And I'm like, aim high, right? Aim high. Go as high as you. Now, again, I know there are always factors, but I'm giving you these high lessons. So here's a question for you. Did that have anything to do with how your event turned out last year? Do you feel your exhibitor acquisition goals were too low? Or maybe some of you set them too high. I don't know. All right, number 4. Here's a big one. I spent the months of April, May, June, July, August visiting as many of my clients' websites as I could. I wanted to see how they were changing the copy, the imagery, the messaging around selling virtual. And it felt like we were trying to sell virtual with the same messaging and the same transactional strategies, right, that we used to sell a live expo. And so the impact of that was when times are tough and people are in crisis, there's no better time to get that one-to-one communication, right, with your customers and really, hear each other and, care for each other. Everybody went through a lot, right? And deepen that relationship, right? Tough times create the opportunity to deepen the relationship. But also, one of the things I was talking about a lot in May and June last year was trying to get the message of solidarity within your industry, that we were fighting, right? And I want my show to be, in terms of my messaging, the last on the food chain. Many of these exhibitors that you are dealing with, we're talking job security here, right? So they had to go to battle to continue to market, right? To continue to exhibit. Because if a high percentage of their job is tied up in that activity and that activity goes the wayside. So this is about working together to save jobs, to save our industry, save our association, right? To save our country, and maybe even save the world, and really get that solidarity. It's us working together in a harmony against the enemy, right? It's us against the enemy. And some of this may have impacted exhibitor expectations. So if you were using images of a bustling exhibit floor in your virtual exhibit prospectus, then in exhibitors' brains are going, wow, there's going to be tens of thousands of attendees, right? And it may have impacted how exhibitors' expectations were or were not managed about the upcoming virtual event. Since virtual events were new to everyone, relationship selling really needed to move to the forefront. Expectation management is probably one of the most important things that we need to do in terms of, so exhibitors are not coming in thinking this is like a live show, thinking they're going to get the amount of traffic they got at a live show, thinking they're going to get the number of leads they got at a live show. We really needed to manage those expectations. And the battle cry for virtual events being new had to be under promise, over deliver. So ask yourself, did this have any impact on your virtual expo last year? And if so, what can you change right now as you look toward your second go round in the virtual world? Number 5, transparency about pre-registration, transparency about who is attending, access to pre-registered attendee lists, and access to attendees during the event. So we're really talking about this whole attendance thing. Who is registered? How many is registered? How can the exhibitor know in advance of the event that enough of the right people will be there? Write that phrase down, by the way, enough of the right people. I'm going to come back to that later when we get in our 10 ways to get more exhibitors. But I felt like we needed to question all pre-existing behaviors here. I know there was the Canned Spam Act. I know there's GDPR, but there was a lot of resistance, right, in shows that I talked to about stepping back and reevaluating how much visibility and access should we give our exhibitors to our attendees during this unprecedented time. And the answer was we needed to give them more than we ever had before. Of course, we had to do it legally within compliance. And there are ways to do that, okay? So the impact of the lack of transparency and access was it really made it difficult for exhibitors to know who's attending. It really made it difficult for them to have targeted, relevant outreach to drive virtual booth traffic. And that's one of the big reasons why so many exhibitors got so little booth traffic, is that they didn't have that ability. So, you know, the big thing here was in a time of crisis, when you are entering a brand new frontier, it's critically important to question any and all pre-existing behaviors that drive value for your customers. We can never forget who really writes our paychecks. It's not the association. It's the exhibitors writing checks and it's the attendees writing checks that are really writing our checks. So we had to really step back and question all of this and ask ourselves, how does doing this deliver value or block us from delivering value for our customers? To me, the question needed to shift from, we can't do that because, it needed to shift to, now how can we do that and serve both parties? Serve the attendee and serve the exhibitor. How can we do that? That's what it needed to shift to. And again, in a time of crisis, when we're all like up to here and we're in ready, fire, aim mode, right? This is hard to do, but it's what we needed to do, because I think some of these statistics that I showed you at the beginning might have ended up a little better had we been able to do some of this. Number 6, here's a big one. And one of my rock star clients knocked this one out of the park this year, Pack Expo. And I think Kelly Feist may be on the webinar with us today. Kelly, if you are, you guys really just blew this one out of the park. When the attendee pre-registered, they categorized their exhibitors into 13 categories, right? Or tracks or groups. And they had the attendee identify which of those categories they were interested in. And they captured this on the registration process, right? And so by not doing this, it was difficult, right, for exhibitors and attendees to find each other. And it was difficult for exhibitors to see the real potential of the event, which is why, right, 60% of exhibitors didn't come on board with virtual in 2021, okay? So you always want to ask yourself, I remember I spoke at your chapter meeting in 9/11. It had to be 10 years ago. We were literally 9/11, beautiful day in DC, and I had 150 of you in the room. And I asked you the question, I said, when it comes to the exposition part of your event, what business are you really in, right? And the answer that we agreed upon that day was, we're in the business, really, if you want to, gentlemen, this is a football, we're in the business of matching supply and demand. So anything we do that makes it easier for demand to find supply, supply to find demand, good for us. We will win economically. Anything we do to block or limit, bad for all parties, and we're going to struggle. So congratulations to Kelly, the PM on my team. I thought that was so brilliantly executed. Next, number 7. The primary reason the attendees were coming to the virtual events, unfortunately, was not to interact with exhibitors, as the evidence proved. The primary reason they were coming was to learn, right? So I wrote an article, I talked about this back in April last year, of taking your educational sessions, right? Your topics, the major topic. Now, if you did like PAC Expo did, and you had those 13 categories of exhibitors, right? Then you would ask yourself, which categories of exhibitors directly support that topic? You know, someone sets in that educational session, right? They get all worked up about the idea. Their minds are highly stimulated. And then when they register for the educational session, including the categories to visit, during the session in the PowerPoint, right toward the end, be sure to visit these categories and really, and creating space between each session. So there was session, interactive block with exhibitors, session, interactive block, but guiding some of that stuff. Now, I know, many of you used AI, matchmaking, different technologies, and some of that worked, some of it didn't, right? I know I was on a virtual event where there was AI matchmaking, and honestly, the matches it was bringing up for me were so far in left field, I was struggling to figure out where the relevance was. But this is a really powerful idea. If you can adapt and apply this for your next event, try to link your topics to your categories of exhibitors and promote, right, to those attendees about, hey, when you're finished with this session, here are the categories that support. And then give them that time. And hey, maybe with your gamification, which worked, kind of didn't, right? As far as pulling people in, now your gamification could have had a lot more stickiness to it instead of just randomly going in, visit 10 booths and get 100 points each, right? So did you try that? Did you try to link your sessions to your categories of exhibitors? And did you make it clearly visible to your attendees before, during, and immediately at the end, or even after, if you had any form of an automatic email or any form of a communication? Thanks for attending this session. You could have done that. This is a great idea to create more engagement between attendees and exhibitors. And the theme is continue the learning. It's not go get sold. It's learn more about the topic by visiting these groups of exhibitors, right? Okay, number 8. Virtual vendors. Virtual vendors were in the catbird seat. Quick question, and go to your poll and answer this. How many of us bought stock in Zoom in February or March? I regret to say that I didn't. By the way, on February 1st, one share of Zoom was $74. On October 31st, one share of Zoom was $534, right? I just went on a sidebar there, but I learned that, and Peloton and all these stocks, there was an opportunity there. But in any case, we're talking virtual vendors here. It was Zoom kind of being one of them, right? Documentation, solid documentation was critical and lacking in a lot of situations. Technical support. Some of these virtual event vendors had there was no one for your exhibitor to talk to, right? Because they were overbooked and understaffed. I talked to one virtual event vendor in April that had 6,000 inbound leads, 6,000 inbound leads. Early access to the virtual booth builder was critical. Early access to the platform, so the exhibitors could train their staff on how to use the one-to-one chat, the group chat, everything, right? These things were really critical. I'll give you an example. I worked with a medical show, right? And all these big medical exhibitors have these internal compliance departments. Every piece of content that they were going to put up on their virtual exhibit had to get passed through the compliance department had to get reviewed and approved before they could upload it to the platform. And the turnaround in these companies was 30 to 45 days. In some scenarios, the exhibitors weren't getting access to the virtual booth builder until 14, 21 days before the event. They weren't getting access to the physical event platform to go in, understand how it works and train it until 3 days before the event, right? So this was problematic, big time problematic. This created stress. This built skepticism, uncertainty, and it really limited exhibitors' ability to execute a virtual program that worked. So we got to put a lot more pressure on our virtual event vendors. Hopefully they've gone through the rounds now and they've got their staffing right and their documentation and tech support. You know, I had so many that couldn't get a tech support person on the phone. You know, kind of like if you tried to get Microsoft on the phone, right? You're not going to get them on the phone. Not good. So the insight going forward, make sure that your virtual event vendor has complete ABC 3rd grade level 1, 2, 3 documentation on how to, you know, the digital assets, on how to upload them and all that. Press them for some form of a technical support team that's available on call, and press to get early access to both the booth builder and the event platform. Those should be critical selection criteria going forward. All right. Did that impact you? I know I'm moving quick here. We got a lot to cover here in the next 10, 15 minutes. So I want to make sure I get done on time. Number 9, lesson. Putting your customer relationships in the hands potentially of overbooked, understaffed vendors during a time of great stress, fear, economic loss, and uncertainty. Okay, the thing that we all needed to remember here, you know, is the law of relationships. Is like Stephen Covey talked about the relationship bank account. You know, you put deposits in and you make withdrawals. And the problem with relationships is one significant withdrawal can undo 10 or 20 really good deposits. Okay, so the lesson here was, and somebody wrote about it, I can't remember who wrote about it in August, that essentially you, the association, the show organizer, kind of had to become like the GSC. You know, you had to become the Freeman or the GES or the Fern or whoever you're working with. You had to be that firewall, right, between, to make sure that your customer relationships were being protected, and equally and more importantly, that your future income stream was being protected. Because again, right, you know, one bad interaction can undo years of great interactions. Okay, so think back to that and how that was handled in your event, and how did you handle that? And was your staff really visible forward? Did they stay engaged? Were they out there making sure exhibitors were being responded to lightning fast? You know, because everybody was really just all over the place this year. All right, number 10, last one. Virtual event vendors essentially provide the equivalent of the exhibitor service kit, the forms, you know, for drayage, labor, security, you know, electrical, plumbing. The majority of the virtual event, quote, training was logistical, operational training, but very few, if any, had any form of strategic training on how to optimize the virtual exhibit. Not just upload your content, anybody can do that, but how to optimize that content for this new reality. Driving qualified traffic, both organically and paid, right? And how to really engage and interact with attendees in the virtual world. So there was a big lack of strategic training, right? And I know we all lost money, right? And everything went, but wow, if there was ever a time, right, where we needed to provide that extra, not just here's a service kit, right? Now was that time. So this kind of put many exhibitors in a position where they were forced to try to succeed at something, one, they've never done before, and two, as we've learned now 9 months into this, it's not that easy to do, right? It's not that easy to do, okay? So if you're doing another virtual event, some form of strategic, not just logistical operations. Key phrase, right? Logistical operations will get the exhibitor to show up. Showing up ain't success in the virtual world. Strategic training will get the exhibitor to do what? Do the right things, right? They'll optimize the platform. They'll drive the right traffic. They'll effectively interact with the visitors. They'll capture the right information, sometimes more than what's embedded, right? They'll do all the right things. This is a investment. It's the equivalent of an insurance policy on the future of your event, right? Because we can't go through round 2 here and have a 47% dissatisfaction rate. If we do, I'm very worried. I have many sleepless nights this year about our industry, worrying about how we're going to overcome this, right? And we got to make sure that if we're pulling our exhibitors into the virtual world, that we're not throwing them into a raging river without a life raft, like a flotation device, or showing them how to swim, right? Because they don't know how to do it. And strangely enough, Exhibitor Magazine and Exhibitor Show, which are, you know, the kind of where exhibitors go primarily. I read Exhibitor every month. I'm watching all their webinars, has done little or nothing in the virtual space, which is a little surprising. So we have exhibitors out there that need to market. They need to keep their brand visible. They need to interact with customers. They need to capture leads, right? And now many of them are skeptical, going, hey, that virtual stuff, tried it. One of two things: I tried it, it doesn't work, or I've heard that it doesn't work. And we're going to have to overcome that if we're going to grow, right? Again, we're looking back so we can grow forward. All right, so quick question. What was one lesson that you've learned that I didn't touch, right? Because again, these 10 are not the only, they're just kind of top level ones, things that I've observed. I know each of you have a unique experience. I'll share a couple of these. We did ask you on the pre-reg, so I'll share a few of these from what you, and by the way, go to your chat right now. Jen, if you would keep an eye on the chat, please, and share one lesson beyond what I've talked about that you've learned. And let me share a few, and Jen, and then tell me what you got. So Jennifer Abdinor said her big lesson was keep it short and keep it simple, right? That was her big lesson. Kara Cayazo, said the continuing education sessions worked well, but the virtual exhibit hall really didn't get the traffic that we wanted, right? Karen Epsteiner said that registration for a virtual event peak 2 to 5 days in advance of the show. So you can't freak out about your pre-reg numbers until you're literally about 3 to 5 days before the event. Thank you, Karen. That is a really astute insight. Let's see, Stacy Hudson said that virtual and hybrid looks like it's going to be the wave of the future. Tiffany said, be creative and flexible. Ask your exhibitors and your partners for help. Have them help. And Karen Vogel said, have a 365 event plan now. Okay. Jen, did we get any new lessons in the chat queue as a result of our?
Yes, Jefferson. A couple insights. One was they found it hard to manage exhibitor expectations when they weren't sure what their own expectations were putting on a virtual event as a show organizer. Another one was virtual events are not easier than in-person events.
Those are really good insights. I'm going to talk in a moment about managing exhibitor expectations. And yes, I agree. Virtual events are not easier than live events. Here's probably one of the biggest things. Everybody jot this down. If there's one message you have to send to all of your exhibitors going forward in a virtual expo, this is a big one. Ready? Here it is. Virtual attendees do not walk up and down a virtual exhibit aisle and fall into booths at random. It ain't happening. It doesn't happen. Pre-marketing and calendaring, meaning having that outreach and trying to get in their mind and on their agenda, you need to try to win the game before kickoff as much as possible. And Joe Federbush, Evolio Marketing, shared with me a really eye-opening stat from his research. And he said that 76% of virtual attendees plan their agenda for the event 5 days before the event. So that's good news, actually, right? Some of you, exhibitors may freak out, and some of you may have stopped selling early and going, well, if they're not in by 2 months prior, they can't make it. Well, given the fact that the majority of attendees are registering closer to, and they're planning their agendas even closer to, that's a good thing. All right. Well, thank you for sharing those. Yeah, definitely not easier than a live event, because in a live event, right, you can win, right, by having a really nice design booth, that grabs attention and pulls. But in the virtual world, you can have the prettiest virtual booth hidden 3 clicks deep. And if they don't get to it, it doesn't matter, right? So that pre-marketing and that understanding is critical. All right, let's keep rolling. I've got to try to get this in 7-8 minutes. I can do this. Hopefully all of you, though, my prayer is that if I quit right now, that by hearing those 10 lessons and the lessons that your colleagues shared, that you have a few of those that you said, yeah, we struggled with that. And that's okay, right? Because that's going to point you to what you got to do to make your next expo more successful, right? That's how you win, right? Success is not a straight climb. It's very jagged. Move up, oh, drop off, climb back up, drop, right? That's how we roll. That's how it is. That's life, right? It's not like this, right? So challenge, right? That struggle. Tony Robbins said it well. He said, when we succeed, we party. When we fail, we ponder. And in the pondering is where the great life lessons come. And I say, this is water, but I'll say, raise a toast to that. Right? All right, let's get rolling. 10 ways to get more exhibitors. Here's the thing right now, the number one message that's got to be continually communicated. And this is not so much about your virtual expo. This is about many exhibitors have lost a lot of revenue, like you, like all of us, have lost a lot of revenue. Sadly, unfortunately, every study of marketing expenditures during economic crises, the first thing that people cut is marketing. The first thing they cut is marketing. So I think a key part of our content and our messaging strategy is why continuing to keep your brand visible, why interacting with your customers, why educating the market is critical to your company's success. Here's a key phrase that I use a lot. Jot it down. It's very sticky. In today's over-cluttered communications world, out of sight really is out of mind, right? So this first thing, they've pulled back they've slashed their marketing budgets. They're really skeptical. The first thing I think we got to convince most about is that why not marketing in this first and second quarter is a fatal business error, right? Fatal, could be fatal to them, right? Number 2, I think you got to segment your exhibitors into their experience. Like you have a group of exhibitors that went through your virtual expo last year. You have a group that didn't. The 2 things that I want to figure out is, have you participated in a virtual expo? Yes or no, 1. And 2, what was your experience? Hey, if they were in the middle or satisfied, not going to be that hard to get them on board. If they were on the dissatisfied, going to be a lot harder to get them on board, right? So for those people that have struggled, the few things you're going to have to do is, number 1 is you're going to have to focus on how the lower cost, it doesn't cost nowhere near as much to do a virtual expo, how easy it is to get value, 1, right? And then 2, you're going to have to differentiate your event, your platform, your attendee marketing, your matchmaking. So differentiate. So number 1, expectation management, ROI is easy. Number 2, differentiate your event and your platform from what you did before, unless it worked, right? And what they may have gone through in other events. Okay, number 3, transparency about attendee registration and giving them more access. One of my clients this year, Leading Age, had one of the great virtual events I was part of. They did something they've never done before in their history in producing an event. they made the entire pre-register attendee list available in advance to all exhibitors. And they asked for opt-in on the reg process, and they shared email addresses. Now, many of you probably just fell out of your seat and have a million questions about that. But what they did was they put in play an exhibitor code of conduct agreement, and the exhibitor had to sign off on usage, right? And then we did a very custom webinar with them on showing exhibitors less is more, how to go in and find the 10 to 25 most important visitors, how to use a show me, you know me strategy to get on their agenda. And we made it loud and clear that any exhibitor that is caught spamming, blitzing the whole list, you'll be ejected from the event. Leading Age also had a platform that had all the attendees registered were available, similar like IAEE had for Expo. Everybody who registered was visible and available. And when they were online, there was a little green check mark. So they had before access and during access. And Leading Age had right up there with PAC Expo, I think one of the most successful virtual expos of the year. But they questioned the rules. They didn't say, hey, we don't do this, right? They said, we probably have to do this now. And they turned out being right. Number 4, capture product interest. However you want to do it, by category, by product, right? Capture it and ask for the opt-in on the reg process. Help us help you, right? Please select the categories you're interested in learning more about, and please let us know how you would like to learn more about these. We promise you will only receive information from the categories you request. This creates a very focused attendee. This could also be monetized big time, big time with your exhibitors. But you got to capture that. Remember, if you're in matching supply and demand, you got to do that, okay? Number 5, be willing to share those product interest counts to help exhibitors. All you have to do to convince an exhibitor to participate is that you will have more than enough of the right attendees at the event. And you'll do everything you can do to put the two of them together. If you do that, the exhibitor will be on board. The number one factor that really has impacted exhibitors' dissatisfaction was they just didn't get any traffic, right? Now, a lot of that falls on them too. Okay, I'm not going to open that can of worms, but we know how most of them are. They just think they can show up and it's going to work out. Number 6, I talked about this in one of our lessons. Tie your exhibitor categories to the primary topic of your educational sessions and really drive attendees, make them aware of the learning continues here in these categories. Promote it before, promote it during. And if you're going to use gamification, maybe slant your gamification to reward visiting the categories. Number 7, educational sessions shorter. 20 minutes seem to be about the length. Seem to be, right? Like a TED Talk almost, right? So if you had 45-minute or 90-minute sessions, there was a study I saw this year said the average attendee that was dropped off of a session somewhere in the 46-minute range. That would obviously assume the session was a lot longer. Keep them short. Keep them short. Another thing Leading Age did, knocked it out of the park. They opened and ended each day with a sizzling general session. They opened short day. It was like 11:30 to 3:30 in bursts. They opened with a sizzling general session. They closed with a sizzling. So they had strong attendance all the way through. Dedicated exhibitor interaction hours, right? Manage exhibitor expectations. And I'm going to go 2 ways here. One, about how easy it is to get return on investment, right? Because the cost is so much lower. But number 2, about virtual attendee behaviors, right? And therefore, hey, for most exhibitors, if they get 5 of the right people to interact or 10 of the right people to interact with them, they're going to be happy. One of the key things you should learn about each one of your exhibitors, and you should be capturing this in a CRM, is what is the conservative revenue value of a single customer to that company. Conservative revenue value of a single customer. So if an exhibitor tells me that it's $25,000 and I have a $3,000 virtual event, I'm going to have a pretty easy time selling that. Right? But you got to know that number to be able to frame that. It's so easy to get ROI, right? Number 9, focused the exhibitor on the reduced cost. I know many of you did it, but the budgeting rule for a live event is floor space times 3 to 5. In a virtual world, outside of marketing, maybe video production, they don't have to spend much, right? So it is easy to get value. It's easy to get ROI, and they don't need anywhere near as much traffic as they thought they needed in the live space. All right, number 10, less is more marketing strategies, right? Get them focused on highly targeted. Again, when we did Leading Age, we had them pick 10 to 25 of the attendees that they felt were the most important to them. We walked them through how to do a one-to-one, show me, you know me strategy, and then arm them with free, more free and low cost marketing ops so you can bring in ancillary revenue. All right, let me close with this and let's get to Q&A. What I've been working on desperately for the last 9 months is I'm results focused, I'm process based. I've been working with my team of 10 trade show experts to identify what are the critical success factors for an exhibitor in the virtual world. We've brought it down to the 7 you see on the screen. They have to know how to analyze the event and the platform. They have to know how to optimize the physical platform and all the different tools. They have to drive traffic to it. They have to know how to engage in the virtual world. They've got to know how to capture, typically more than what's embedded in the electronic capture. They have to know how to measure value, where they got value, and they ultimately have to leverage the event. Okay, so I've been working all that. If anyone wants to know more about that, reach out to me at any time. I'm glad to share this. We're going industry wide with it, this VEMP, virtual exhibit marketing process, to help us get more exhibitors in and guide them to the promised land. All right, let's close it up and go to Q&A. This is our lifeline, at least the first half of the year. We shared 10 lessons here. I hope you found 1 or 2 that applied to you that you go, I can do something about that. We went over 10 ways to get more and ways to adjust your communication strategies. Do that. All right. So back to you, Rob. We are for closing questions and any additional thoughts.
Well, thank you so much, Jefferson. Just outstanding. And I was watching the numbers and people were hanging on. I think we are actually at the end of our time. So Jen, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what we might want to do is we'll collect any additional questions out of the chat. And of course, please feel free to send them in and we'll get those answered for you with Jefferson.
Absolutely, Rob. And anybody who would like the slide presentation, I did put his email address in chat. Please contact him directly. The recording will be on our website next week.
That's great. So thank you, everybody, for joining. I want to give a special shout out to Federal Conference who supported and sponsored this session today. Thank you guys very much. Great session. Really appreciate your support and your help. And don't forget, next meeting is on February 12th. You'll be getting a lot more information about that.